Addictions have become more and more common as the landscape in Australia changes. You know, when you think of an addict, you think of someone that's maybe down and out or someone that's homeless. But in reality, addiction can hit anybody. And today we're going to be talking about the families that get impacted by addiction. Hi, I'm Joey Buzzardsville, and welcome to the Secret Men's Business Podcast. On today's show, we're going to be speaking to Angela Ireland, who is a person that knows a lot about addictions and is an expert in all of that in Melbourne and Australia. So let's welcome Angela to the show. Angela, how are you?
Very good, Joe. Thanks very much for inviting us.
Thank you. I mean, I haven't seen you in so long. And just for our listeners, I used to be a volunteer at where you work, and I loved my time there. And again, I've always had you in the back of my mind to invite you. And when I saw you on LinkedIn, I grabbed the opportunity. So thank you. So before we start, do you want to just tell our listeners a little bit about where you work and your maybe your introduction into addictions?
Okay, fine. Yes, many, many years ago, I work at Shark. It's called the Self-Help Addiction Resource Centre, which the name says it all, really. Self-help, addiction, and a resource centre. And when I went there looking for answers for a family member and friends that I had at the time, and this is way back in the 90s, where drugs was almost unheard of. It was suddenly heroin was in the streets, and the newspaper had a daily death toll. Wow. A death toll in the Herald Sun. Can you imagine that? And it was a really frightening, and people were nodding off in lanes in the cities, and people were stepping over. There were ambulances everywhere. It was a very bizarre time. And
so can I just ask, was that also, it sounds like it was also very shameful, for them to post numbers and people were dropping off in the street. Was it a very sort of did people see drugs differently then?
Oh, well, I mean, people thought drugs was a homeless person's situation. It was something that people who were down and out. And obviously today we have learnt the polar opposites. I can't go anywhere. I can't even go into a shop to try on a coat. If I say, I need something for work, what do? I always say I'm a hairdresser or something totally different. Wherever I am on the golf course or anywhere, everyone has a family member, knows someone who has an addiction. I mean, addiction is so common, and people just, think it's someone else. It can't be me. And that whole issue of families around addiction, shame, guilt, and fear. What did we do wrong to have something like this happen in our lives? And they don't, they cover it up and hide it and don't do anything about it for so long until the problem grows and grows and grows. And then, of course, it comes to a point where everyone knows or something happens, and then it has to be looked at. So it's a really, talking about it and making it every day, which is what it is. And, people in all walks of life take something for some other reason, become addicted to something. And today, young people are now addicted to their phones and gaming and all those things. That's another whole topic, which is really scary.
Well, just on that, because and I know it's another topic, but are we aware that that's an addiction, or are we still at the point where we think it's just overuse?
Well, that's the whole thing. People aren't. You go into a restaurant and you see a baby propped up in a high chair with a laptop or something, watching something. And what we know, and I'm going up to Morwell on Thursday to open 4 films we've made for young people about gaming to gambling. I mean, it is highly addictive and it affects your brain development. So starting off young, it's going to have huge impact in the future. Really big impact. And that's the whole issue. The younger people start doing something, the longer it lingers and the worse it can get. And it come from a totally, innocent thing. And I know in Italy now, or in France, they used to always have wine and give. Now they no longer do that to the young kids. It's sort of, they understand that it's not a good thing. And I can remember when I had a son, he was young, and my husband's father said, you want a sip of beer? It was a sip of Pa's beer. It was sort of something. Well, today it's a major no-no because we know the impact it has on the developing brain.
Yeah.
So going back to working with families, the whole thing about it is keeping secrets. And keeping secrets. And, what we've discovered working with families from heroin in the 90s to gambling today is that everyone does the same thing. They keep it secret and don't tell anyone. And secrets, and they lie as well because they're covering up and they're so embarrassed. And so
Mm.
all the lies and secrets only make it worse and affect the family members so much that we've learnt over the time that family members can often be more mentally affected than the actual person who's happily going along with their addiction.
Yeah,
And
I was gonna ask you, like, so what are some of the main things that they, you know, I mean, I used to volunteer on your
yeah,
switchboard, and a lot of the, I mean, back then, a lot of the calls were about drugs. So you know, what in regards to gambling and drugs, even gaming, say they've got a teenager who doesn't want to go to school. Like, what are
mm.
some of the things that they endure? Like, what are some of the things that happens when an addict is not willing to participate in a family environment?
What did the family endure? What's that?
Yeah, yeah. What do the family have to endure? Like, you know, do they, is there bashings? Is there verbal abuse? Like, what are some of the things that they have
Well,
to
to
come
start
up?
off with, you see, it ends up in this sort of drama triangle, we call it the drama triangle. You know, that the family try and rescue. And
Mm,
so what they say is, I'm going to rescue my son, or I'm going to rescue my partner. And, he's fallen asleep on the couch overnight, drinking all night, and he's thrown up or something like this. So what I do is I clean it all up and I help drag him to bed and I look after him and I do everything. And of course, he does the same thing over and over because he hasn't faced the consequences of what he's doing. But I feel I'm rescuing him and it affects me. I've got a sore back or I've got this. It affects me in many ways. And so they keep on doing it. So the impact, and it also, I can't have someone come and visit, or I can't go out because I'm going to wait home and see that he comes home. I'll be
mm,
looking out the window to see if my son's come. And then he might come in the back door and look at me looking out the window at 3 in the morning and say, "Are you crazy? What are you doing?" And these are all the sort of things that families members' lives go out of kilter. And so many family members have told me how they've ended up in hospital with different things happening to them
mm.
because of the stress and strain on their life, which they've given themselves by sort of becoming absorbed in the other person and trying to change them,
Yeah.
rather
I mean,
rescue them.
yeah. I mean, one of the things that I remember hearing a lot of with people that have got children or family members that are on drugs is, I have to help them because they may kill themselves or
Mm, mm.
because they may end up hurting themselves. So there's this fear there of them. I don't know. I was always trying to figure out if that was a sort of blackmail that the user was using, or if that was just a fear that the parent or
That
family member was
as
doing.
soon as they would stop doing what they normally do, "Mum, you've got to give me that money because my dealer will kill me, or this will happen,
Yeah.
or if you don't, this will happen." They up the ante. If the parent suddenly says, "Okay, all right, I'm not going to do that this time," then what the person using with the addiction does is up the ante a bit, and
Mm,
that then frightens the hell out of the family members, and they cave in. And this goes on, this sort of progression. That's sort of like, terrifying and scary. And so, always when you're governed by your heartstrings, your brain doesn't kick in. But sort of realizing that it's your choice if that's what you choose to do. But I choose not to give you that money anymore because it doesn't work. Because you keep on doing what you're doing.
mm.
So it's really a matter. What we try and do is support families to change their behaviour, to look after themselves, to allow the family member to feel the consequences of their behaviour and to not feel guilty and responsible. Family members, people pick up drug use and gambling addiction for a number of reasons. And, there's so many factors in society today, like, the COVID times.
Mm.
People were gambling on their phone. It increased,
And drinking, like
dramatically.
there was a lot of normalized drinking. I kept seeing on Facebook people just posting that they were drunk because they had
That's
nothing to
right.
do, and it became normalized. Like, so what
Yeah.
other mistakes do you feel? The money one's a big one and enabling, but are there any other common mistakes that family members do that allow the user or the addict to, I guess, believe that it's okay?
To continue on doing what they're doing. Well,
Yeah.
it's not like they say it's okay in any way. It's just that when people look ahead at what might happen, they get
Mm,
really anxious. See, family members sit there thinking, "Oh my God, he could do this tonight. This could happen. This could happen." All
mm,
of the things that could happen, actually run their decision making. It's not what happens. They
Mm.
don't stay in the moment. They look back and they think, oh, what did I do wrong? Did I send them to the wrong school? Or did this happen? Or should I have done this? All sorts of different things all the time. And they get depressed. Or they look forward and they worry and get anxious about what might happen. So they're going, all the time. They don't know what's happening in their life, instead of staying and just dealing with whatever happens in the moment and not anticipating any outcomes and being rational, which is the
Right.
hardest thing for family members, but more importantly, leading by example in their life, looking after themselves, which
Yeah.
you find they're home on the couch, the parent, they can't sleep, they're up wandering around or the partner, many a partner is seriously impacted and, uh, so many things go wrong in marriages, but the worst part of all is the impact on children, you
Yeah.
know, and gambling is the biggest issue of the lot.
Yeah.
Gambling, I thought gambling, having been working in ICE for the 2 or 3 years before, I thought I'd seen everything and heard everything from family members. And I thought gambling is going to be a nice, softer way forward. Gambling is sort of legal and it's nice and everyone does it. And when I went into gambling, I was horrified by the family violence because of the loss of everything
Yeah.
and the fear, the loss of all their money, having to sell, sitting on boxes outside the house
Mm.
as it's been sold, and
Well,
children having
there
to go and
seems
live
to
with
be a
grandma.
a stronger urgency, isn't it? If you've got no money
Yes.
and you gamble, and also the stakes are higher because people are spending all their pay and so on. But like the thing that I find fascinating, Angela, is like you're saying all of that, but why then? Like there's so many ads on TV that promote it, like with the apps and all that. Like it doesn't sort of make sense, does it? Like
Uh,
they can do that, which is I know at the end of all the apps, the ad commercials now, there's a disclaimer that says gamble responsibly, which I think is good for people to understand that. But if you're an addict, you're not going to read that. So why do you think there's that contradiction between what you're doing versus what's being allowed?
well, because there's at least 28 ads in free-to-air television a night that children can see. There's
Wow.
gambling, yes, and if you watch a sports game, you know what you see.
Yeah.
I mean, people, it's just heartbreaking, really. But the thing is, I know that kids today, 5-year-old kids, can name 2 gambling apps, and
Mm.
they talk about the winning. Did you get I got the first kick. I got the goal. I got. Did you get that? Not.
Yeah.
It's a different way of talking about the game.
Mm.
It's really seriously, totally changed, which is incredibly sad because this great sporting nation of ours that loved the game and the sports and whatever, now the gambling thing is running it. It's really,
Mm.
and people make money in all levels of society,
Mm.
even advertising people everywhere
Everyone's
make
making
money.
money out of it.
That's
Yeah.
right. So people are making money, and people say, well, why don't you just gamble properly? Why do you have to do it? But something goes wrong. Say someone loses a job or something happens in their life. I've spoken with families where the mother who's older, lost and lonely, and gambled away the house, and things have gone wrong. And also, the partner might have lost his job and secretly, is on his phone, and now they don't know when he goes outside, if it goes to the bathroom, if he's losing the mortgage or what.
Mm.
So banks now are really, having to bring in new rules because they get hysterical people in their banks saying, how did you let my husband take, all the mortgage or add all this, what are you doing? You've ruined
Mm.
our lives, things like this are something that's really common. But the
Mm.
biggest thing of all is the impact on the kids. How many families that I've spoken with and worked with, in regional Victoria, across Victoria, whose children have been seriously impacted because they've had to leave school, move town, they've lost their friends, they won't go to school, they self-harm, they do a whole lot of things and even pick up drug use because is solace for them, or gaming on their phone or gambling,
Yeah.
the same thing because they've lost their life that they knew. And that's what happens when something happens to people. We look for something to absorb us and take us away. And that's why people pick up gambling, because it's free, it's available. I mean, it's free, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
it's freely available, and everyone does it. So why can't I?
Mm.
And one guy was telling me, he had went through that sort of, and his family, he lost his job, and he didn't feel like he was as good as his other brothers and sisters, and so he was going to make money. He was going to do this anyway. He was gambling, and it was a family function, and he was losing really badly. And he said, "Oh, I'll just get my brother's credit card, and I'll be able to make it all up, and I'll put the money back." And in the end, he cleared out his brother's credit card, and everything else, and on it went. And these are the sort of things. And everyone's, how could you do that? How could you do that to your brother? They're saying, the shame, which only makes it worse, and that increases his desire to get it back.
So,
the next time, and it's the anticipation that people have. They tell me before they're going to do it. This time I'm going to. This next time I do it, I'm going to win back all of this, and my whole life's going to change, and I'm going to be a superstar, and I'm going to be able to give mum this and dad that and this and that.
It's that delusional fantasy, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because this is a men's podcast, and we do, the podcast goes to everyone, but it's mainly about men. So I think I know the answer, but what is the stats like? Is it more men that are doing it versus women, or is it equal?
Well, there's a lot of older women do, and there is a larger majority of 18 to 35-year-olds who gamble. And I've spoken with, strangely, sports people, sportsmen who have gambled and lost heavily.
Well, I think it's part of their environment. But the thing that you mentioned earlier, I think, is the key is that it's the phones, because the phones have given us access. Because I've also noticed, seeing private clients, that there's been an increase in young adults, say 16 to 25, that have got a porn addiction because of the phones. Because you can carry everything in your phone now. So I think that the gambling was still happening, like when we didn't have the phones, but it was probably easier to hide, and also you have to go to the casino or you have to go somewhere. But now you just press a button and you can make a bet. So
you had to go into the TAB and bet and do something physically, leave the place and make and you could be caught out. You see, that's the whole thing. The difference between, and why it's harder with families when gambling's the addiction, is that no one knows for a long while. But you see, if someone's drunk at the table, all the rallies say, "Oh, listen, Angela, what are you going to do about him? What are you going to do? He can't behave like that. He's not coming to our 21st, or he's not doing this if he's going to." But with gambling, he's quietly sitting at the table, smiling and talking, and gambling on his lap. "Oh, I've just got a work message. Hang on, won't be a tick. Oh yes, now go on. What were you saying?" And no one knows. So the thing is, with drug use, particularly ice, everyone, even the neighbours in the street, a person I was working with recently told me that the people in the street have complained and said the behaviour is so bad. He's an ice user, okay, and the yelling and the carrying on. So it's really embarrassing for them. They're really out there, so they really had to do something and make sure, because the people in the street would complain, the police would come, they'd take him down, and she wouldn't press charges, and then he'd be back, and the same thing would happen again the next week, and the neighbours would complain. So then it sort of came to a head. But with gambling, no one knows about it. It's not seen, it's not heard, and it's kept secret. So it's really, that's the real real knife in the back for families, gambling, because it's able to be kept secret for so long.
And you don't probably find out till, like you said, when there's a bank statement or something.
Absolutely.
Because it's money, and there is a correlation with a lot of men having shame, like you said. And you may not know the answer to this, but is there an increase with suicide attempts or risk when they get caught out?
That is a very sad reality of gambling, and that family violence is huge, and suicide, because it's hopeless and helpless. I can't do anything anymore. Yes,
and it's also embarrassing, like you said, isn't it? It's like if you're a sort of a pillar of the community, and then you've got the secret, and then you get caught, and you've lost the house. So, can I know you do what you do for the families, but and I don't know much about gambling, but is there a lot of support for gamblers, or is it a new
Absolutely,
thing?
a lot of support for gamblers, and that's the main thing. What you're doing, Joe, is fabulous because talking about it is the main thing, making it people aware that this is a real issue and affecting a lot of people and a lot of a lot of people across the board, really highly respectable people across all walks of life. And it's really important to discuss it and raise it as an issue so that people will talk about it and seek help. And if you even vaguely suspect someone, just have a chat with them and say, look, there's these great services, and Gamblers Help is one of them that you can actually get for the gambler and get support and get and resources. And there's phone numbers of Gamblers Help, which I hope you'll put up with
Yeah,
this.
I'll post everything, like even
Yes, that's
your
right.
number.
Yes,
Yeah,
Gamblers Help and our Family Drug and Gambling Helpline for families, which also gives out our 1300 number, gives out all of that to people. And it's really important that this is an area that's discussed and that they raise it
yeah,
and not be frightened, but raise it in a way, not threatening or, talk about it from a point of view of using I language. I'm really concerned about our finances moving forward, what we could do and what, rather than you, and sort of
yeah, and
that
blaming.
causes the conflict.
Mm.
So, and what could we do? Maybe we should see a financial counsellor. So there's financial counsellors at Gamblers Help, which are really helpful. But just because you've raised it and bringing it out, that will create some friction because it's no longer secret, but recognising that it's important and having that support around you when you do it. And
Yeah.
for the person affected to understand you're not alone.
Mm.
This
Because
is,
I was going to say to you, like the bringing out is a really big thing. So I remember when I saw on the news that famous, wealthy Johnny Depp, like he's a multi-millionaire, and the news story was Johnny Depp is penniless because he gambled his money away,
oh,
and drank his money away, and so that sort of like was I was in shock, but that also sort of said to me, okay, the rich people are doing it. And so I think you're right. We need to get out there and talk about it because it doesn't just impact the rich people or the sports people, it impacts everyone. And so why do you think people are, besides the shame, why do you think people don't want to talk about it? Like, even like, I think any addiction, people are still uncomfortable. How do we break that cycle? Like, I know doing this is helping, but is there anything else that you can think about that we can do to
how do
let
we break?
people, yeah,
Yes,
the cycle of hiding things and shame, and let's put that under the carpet. Let's not talk about that.
yes. How can you break that cycle? That's a really critical question. And the only way of breaking it is talking about it and normalizing that there is a number of people and a number of services, running events across the place. We're doing
Mm,
with street soccer and homeless people having speakers. We're doing with Mornington Peninsula Voice at the theatre, having speakers come along and speak about gambling and the impact on families and the numbers. It's huge.
mm,
And all of these things are really important. Raising it in other areas, in
yeah.
sports clubs, having speakers talk about their experience of
It
gambling
is,
and
it is
how
a little,
important.
it is a little bit disappointing that it's not really heavily spoken about in the media, isn't it? Like these
Yes,
podcasts that are private, there's so many podcasts talking about these things, which I think is good because podcasts now are more common. But you don't really hear about all that stuff in the media unless it's just like a superstar or someone that's they're just
yes.
using it as a story. I wanted to ask you one of the last questions is that I'm really all for empowerment, right? So do you feel that some of the family members that are calling you are becoming more empowered and leaving rather than staying? Or do you feel that they're trying to work through it?
Oh, okay. So the first thing, I guess I agree with you, empowering people, and that's what we suggest, that they empower their family member who's affected
Mm,
instead of trying to rescue them. And say to them, wow, that must be very challenging what you're going through, but I know you'll be able to work out what to do.
well,
What
that's
do you think
good.
you might need to get support? What would you need? And so on. rather than telling them this is what you've got to do, making them feel helpless and hopeless, and leading them. That just helps make them more dependent on people to do for them, and dependent on their alcohol, drug use, or gambling to make them feel good. The anticipation of doing it, and then the downside of it. So they've got to do more of it to feel better or try. So it goes up and up. But having someone trying to empower them, what do you think you could do to bring about a change in your life? What would you like to do? Start that way. I can't do this anymore because it's not working for me. Yeah. But I'd really love to know, to help you, support you in when you decide what you need to do, because I know you can work it out. That's sort of more.
I mean, I was just curious about, like you were saying about domestic violence, and I'm thinking, I hope, right, that, with all the coverage of Me Too and all the, women's equality and all that, that some women are not tolerating that anymore. You know what I mean? Like they're they're not allowing themselves to stay there because they're afraid. They're actually saying, you know what, I deserve better, and they leave the person. Because if the person doesn't want to stop the addiction, they're going to continue doing it, aren't they?
Well, that's totally so, Joe. And in so many cases, I had a woman who rang me from her car, of which I had to talk her into pulling over along the side of the road. She had her children in the back seat. She was running away and leaving her husband because she was scared, but also was gambling, and she was hysterical. It's really, it's a sort of double, sided sword, as it were, because the impact on the family, they're losing everything too, and so that is why. And for the gambler, they're losing everything. So that is why, doing anything that you can to support people getting the help that they need to make a difference. And
that's a good. Funny enough, I didn't think of that. Like, you really had a good way of explaining that. Like, we sometimes think the best thing to do is to tell them to get away, but we don't think about the impact of the children and all that. But by getting support, you actually can solve the problem, which is really good. I think that's the message that we can take away from today's interview. I think
yes, one could hope, and there's always, a future possibilities of change, and that's bringing about change. If you keep on doing what you've been doing, you'll keep on getting what you've got.
Exactly.
So working out what you're going to do now that's different. I think that's Einstein's definition of stupidity.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with people gambling. They get locked in. They keep on doing the same thing. Oh, I'll just make more next time, and I'll fix it all up. And the families, I'll just do this again, and they're just doing this never-ending. I call it the cycle of addiction. And it's stepping out of that and looking at it and saying, what can we do? And the main thing you can do is get support for yourself. Get support for yourself, and that's the one thing. And don't feel ashamed about. Recognize that that's a really big thing that you're doing. You're recognizing a need in your life and doing something about it. That's a real pat on the back to do something like that.
Yeah.
And that's a really big step. So, with the numbers that you're going to provide, that's what people can do. And we wish them all the well for a really happy and fruitful, to be thriving, not just surviving. That's what we want.
Yeah,
yes.
It's so inspiring. I mean, like, I love your passion. I mean, I remember when I was working, volunteering, that I used to watch you run around and just doing, your passion and your energy. So I just want to say a big thank you from me and everyone listening for you taking the time out, because I know you're a very busy woman, and you've really given us a lot to think about, and I will provide all the numbers. And hopefully, if you're free, I would love to invite you back to talk about maybe the phone stuff, because I think that is going to be the next big wave, isn't it?
That would be great.
Yeah.
No problem. Thanks, Joe. Thanks very much for bringing this attention to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. You've been listening to the Secret Men's Business podcast. So don't forget that the podcast is out on Mondays and Thursdays. So don't forget, hit the subscribe button, like, and make sure that you get notified of all our episodes. Okay, guys, have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Bye.